The first and most important step I always tell people, I'm not a professional, but I think talking to someone or anyone you know, a loved one, a friend, and saying, actually I'm struggling, I'm going through this, I'm a bit scared, and getting the first conversation going, because that will inevitably help. It helped me. I told my parents, I said, I want to go to the doctor, there's something wrong with me. But only you know when you're ready. You don't have to rush into telling someone. When you feel comfortable, when you feel a bit better on a day, it's the day to tell them, and understanding it's going to be okay. But it just takes time, because when I was ill I just wanted to get better the day after, you know. But it took 3 years, but it did get better, so it just takes time.
Hello, I'm Sheri Jacobson, and this is TherapyLab, a podcast dedicated to therapy, thought, and the art of mental well-being. In this episode, we are joined by the founder of Maison de Choup, George David Hodgson, to talk about his own experiences with anxiety that led him to create a fashion label with mental health awareness and charity at its heart. Hello, George.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm privileged.
Can we start off with a well-being check-in? How are you today on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest?
I'm probably about a 7. I'm feeling quite good today. The sun's out, you know, and it relaxes my mood. So yeah, pretty good.
Is that something you do from time to time, check in with yourself?
Yeah, every now and again, particularly when I'm, you know, quite tired, I sort of gauge how I'm feeling and, you know, trying to understand what's going through my head to combat that. So yeah.
I wonder if we can start off by you telling us a little bit about what you're working on, what keeps you busy.
So at the moment, I'm working on a lot of stuff. I'm a public speaker, mental health campaigner, but I also own a fashion brand called Maison de Choup, which I started out of my own severe anxiety. Yes, and you're wearing the very popular
Not the first time I've worn it. I do love it. So do take us through what it stands for and the genesis.
So you are wearing the Words Fail Me t-shirt. And when I was really, really poorly, I used to have so many thoughts going through my head, and I used to write down and draw my thoughts and feelings. So from that, the Words Fail Me design is a sort of culmination of that thought, that inside your head when you have anxiety, you have so much going on, but you don't know how to express yourself. So simply, you know, words fail me.
And the one that you're wearing, is that
the one that I'm wearing is just, this is an embroidered sort of jumper, hoodie, in a nude colour, with the logo on it, with the name of the logo. And the name actually means, Choup was in it in my sister Charlotte when I was younger, and she helped me through when I was suffering and was always there for me really close. So it's like a little dedication to her. It's House of Charlotte. So this is just a standard hoodie, one of the limited edition ones, this one.
And are you okay to reveal what's on underneath as a special surprise?
I can try.
This one I love. This one is...
Yeah, so this is the statement piece of the collection. And this is the Warrior Not Warrior one, based on the fact that, you know, we are all warriors, not warriors, if that makes sense. But all the designs have a story, and they're all based around mental health. So each one is different, but they're not in your face about mental health. They're all subtle, non-triggering designs. So if anyone likes them, like the one you're wearing, like the one I'm wearing, they can like the design. It doesn't necessarily label them as I have an anxiety problem or anything. But if someone asks, that's a nice design, what it's about, where is it from, they can then explain the story behind the brand and how it came from a dark place and is positively changing the world.
And how did this evolve? What was the kind of the lead up into you deciding that you would go into fashion?
So my story is quite a strange, long one. Initially, I was very unwell from an episode of taking drugs at a festival, always having anxiety as a young person. This was then my trigger to making it worse. So I had panic attacks on a daily basis. I was washing my hands 50 to 100 times a day because I thought everything I touched had drug traces on it. So I'd have to wash my hands, which would lead to a panic attack. And I had anxiety and also suicidal thoughts. And from that, I didn't go to college. I had to leave college. And then I came out and I didn't have a job. So I had all this free time in my hands. I used to write down on my draw my thoughts and feelings in notebooks. And as I started getting better, I went along to Dad's office with him, started putting them on Photoshop, playing around with them, adding colour and stuff. And I thought, maybe I could do something with these. And maybe I could put them on a t-shirt. And that's when the idea of Maison de Choup came about, and I could use fashion as a vehicle to raise awareness of what I was going through.
And how is it for you now? Because assuming you have ongoing, like where are your panic attacks at the moment and anxiety levels and OCD?
So in terms of my panic attacks now, I don't really experience them. I'm quite calm on that front. I have the coping mechanisms to be able to combat them, recognise when they are coming. I almost had one the other day, but I very quickly recognised it and stopped it. In terms of my anxiety, though, I still suffer quite severely from anxiety. You know, it's always about the future or the past. I'm never really in the present still. A lot better now than I was a couple of years ago, but it's always about worrying what I'm not in control about. So I'm a bit of a control freak. So when I'm not in control of something, my anxiety heightens slightly. But again, I've got the coping mechanisms, and through the therapy I had, I learned to deal with them.
So it's fully possible to go through anxiety and still run a successful business and multiple operations behind it. And
100%. I think as soon as you have the coping mechanisms to be able to deal with what your own anxiety is, you know, everyone's different, everyone has a different problem. But once you recognise what your triggers are, what your boundaries are, you can almost achieve anything you want to normally. Just understanding what, when you burn out, that it's bad, and what will push you too far. But once you recognise that, you can do anything.
Can you take us through what it was like for you to have a panic attack? For those people who are listening or watching who don't have an understanding, maybe they've gone through similar sets of symptoms but haven't recognized it as such, or who have not at all. What was it like? So
panic attacks are, they almost feel like you're dying. I was in the horse's field when I started experiencing one. And much to the drugs, similar to the drugs, MDMA, it felt like I was back on it. So I was in the field and my heart started racing. I started getting tunnel vision, I started sweating, heart palpitations. I felt like I wanted to run away. So I actually ran inside the house and told my parents what I was feeling. I thought I was on ecstasy again. And they were like, sit down, calm down. I couldn't sit down at all. I was running around. I wanted to fall asleep. I thought I was going to black out. My body was so tense and so full of energy that I had no idea what was going on, and I literally thought I was going to die at that point, because it felt like I was going to black out. There's so much blood going around my body, so it's a terrifying experience, and you know it's almost coming on because you get a tingling sensation in your body. Then you start panicking because you think you're going to die or you're having a heart attack, which then leads you to panic more, and you can't breathe properly. You start hyperventilating, and that's why I used to use a brown paper bag to breathe into, which you can see there.
Do you want to take us through this?
So from the panic attacks, I used to, as I said, breathe into a paper bag to regulate my breathing, because when you're hyperventilating, you need to slow down the breathing to get more oxygen into your body.
So George is holding up a paper bag. It says panic attack labeled across it. Breathing into this paper bag can ease a panic attack, and wearing its contents can help prevent it happening in the first place. Namely, you would package your wares in the t-shirts or the sweatshirts in that bag, because it does contribute. Well, you are not only donating a percentage to is it Young Minds?
Young Minds charity.
Simultaneously. But is that the kind of thing that is in your coping tool bag for panic attacks? Would you carry that with you? And
I used to. I used to have to carry it with me everywhere I went. On the train, in the car. I had to go everywhere with my parents, and that was my crutch. If I didn't have it, I'd then worry about it. But when I had it with me, I knew I was going to be okay. It was getting that away from me, because otherwise, if I didn't have it, I'd panic. And obviously learning the coping mechanisms to be able to deal with that without it was another step.
Right, so to deal without it.
So that was another thing, but that was a major contributor to my recovery, was, that was regulating the breathing, just doing it without the bag.
Right. Yeah. Right. And how did you learn that? And the coping mechanisms that you've acquired, was it things that you picked up on your own along the way, or did you have professional support and guidance? So
I was actually fortunate enough to go privately for my therapy. My parents sent me privately. So I first saw a hypnotherapist or a psychiatrist who did hypnotherapy.
Right. And that's unusual.
It was fantastic. Yeah. And he put me under the subconscious mind of recognising the symptoms of a panic attack and changing the thought process from I'm not on MDMA they are actually just panic attack symptoms. And he actually induced one once, which was quite scary.
For demonstration purposes.
Yeah, and he said, anytime you start feeling, you can come out of it, which helped. So that was about a year and a half. Then I had CBT therapy. He referred me to a CBT specialist and was teaching me the coping mechanisms there. And the coping mechanisms were almost, so because I was always catastrophizing and it was worst case scenario, and with anxiety it's 10 times worse, I didn't have a headache, I had a brain tumour, there was like no in between. With the coping mechanisms, it was breaking down the thoughts. So, I've got a headache, it's quite a hot day, I haven't had any water, maybe I'm just dehydrated, and breaking down the thoughts to let them flow was really helping my anxiety generally, and I still do that now, step back, step-by-step process.
Anything else that you took away from how many CBT sessions did you have? Do you remember for how long?
Ooh, not how many, but I had it for a year and a half as well. Okay. So 3 years in total of therapy.
Yeah.
But just generally understanding that talking about it helps as well. When I started getting better, it was in a beautiful state, and we just started walking around the gardens, and I was talking about how I was feeling, and he was asking me questions, and I felt better for it. And I recognised that I was getting better when it started becoming a chore going to the therapy. I'd wake up and think, oh, do I have to go again? I don't really need to go. That's when I knew I was on the road to recovery.
Yeah.
So.
What do you make of the connection with the therapist? Do you think, what was more important for you, the kinds of tools and techniques that were talked about and that you eventually integrated, or was it more the connection or a combination of the two?
Probably a combination of the two. I think what I recognised was that I was so now determined to get better. I was so fed up of being ill and unwell and not wanting to go out and stuff like that. So I was determined to get better by any means. There was a lot of homework with the CBT, but I did it. I wrote in a notebook every day about how I was feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 like you did, and what thoughts were going through it and what triggered the thoughts. And there was a lot of that, but I was dedicated to it because I knew that it would help me in the long run. And very fortunately, I did get on with the psychiatrist. He had a bit of a dry sense of humour, but that was fine. And then the CBT therapist was a little bit different, but he was more calm, relaxed questions, asking me how I was and going through it.
And what was the process of finding each of those practitioners, the psychiatrist and then subsequently the CBT therapist? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. I remember very well because we went to CAMS and I was told I'd have to wait 40 weeks to get the help. So my parents were scared, I was scared, and then we went back to the GP. We very fortunately had a GP that was quite sympathetic with adolescent mental health, and he, my parents said, is there anything else we can do? The GP said, can you afford to go privately? I've got someone I can recommend to you. So he actually recommended the psychiatrist initially, then the psychiatrist recommended the therapist, the CBT therapist. So it was, and it was, it was really quick. It was a call, an email, and then a week later, or within that week, I was seeing someone. So
very, very quick. So we've talked a little bit about panic attacks and the OCD. Do you recall when that first set in?
Vaguely, I think that came off that initially that didn't come from the panic attacks, but I came from when I used to go out. I was so paranoid everyone was on drugs that everything I then touched I thought had drugs on it. So I'd wash my hands, and it slowly spiraled out of control from there, using the drug thing as a trigger point. So anything I did start touching, and then it sort of got out of control. From it stepped up a bit. So I couldn't touch my TV controller. I thought I had drugs on it, which then became like a psychosis. And I was washing my hands, 50 to 100 times a day. Mum was going through a whole tub of soap. The towels kept having to be washed. And it was getting exhausting, which then obviously led to the suicidal thoughts.
Right. So for those people who don't know what OCD entails and what it feels like to have those set of symptoms, you've got the intrusive thoughts, you've got the thought of wanting to prevent contamination, and then the compulsion, which is the thing that you do to try and prevent that coming out. To what extent were you aware of any of that at the time, or was it only kind of afterwards that you understood? I was fully aware
of it. I was always aware of what I was doing. I just couldn't stop it because I wasn't equipped to do so. And I was permanently or perpetually combating my thoughts, thinking, stop, I've got to stop this, but what if? And that's all that was, I was obsessed about, you know, it was filling my brain. And I had to get up, I had to check the door. The door was another one, checking the door was locked. Yeah. I'm not quite sure what I thought, but that was another one. I checked the door 3 or 4 times a night, I couldn't sleep. And it was all getting too much. It was all like imploding on myself.
When you say getting too much, it presumably is impacting on your sleep. Was it impacting on other aspects of day-to-day functioning?
Yeah, I mean, I started controlling the environment around me. So another aspect was music. I kept turning off the radios if I didn't like the music, because that came back to the festival of where I did the drugs. So it started impacting, you know, my parents' lives. My sister was in London for a while at the time, so she didn't feel it too much, but so they struggled a little bit as well.
So all consuming.
Yes,
really.
Exactly.
And for how long did that go on for in total?
So the severe period lasted probably about 1.5 years, maybe longer, until I started, you know, the private help, and in the depth of the private help, it's starting to get a little bit better. So it was up and down from there, and then it, you know, slowly teetered off, and I was weaned off my medication, and, you know, started getting better from that. But it still was there. So it took about 1 year after to, I'm not saying fully gone, but the OCD stopped, the panic attacks stopped, and I was back to myself. I did my normal stuff.
And the suicidal thoughts, was that at the peak of the OCD and panic symptoms?
That was because I couldn't face having panic attacks every day. I was scared of having a panic attack, which actually made me have a panic attack. Washing my hands too much, you know, checking the door, not having any sleep, not being able to go out. My world shrunk, and I thought, this is just unbearable. So I started getting the thoughts, and that's why my parents got scared, and I got scared. So, you know, we took action.
And for those again who are listening or watching at that moment, if they can relate, what would you say to others that may have helped you at the time, or just kind of looking back, any advice that you would give to yourself at the time?
Yeah, I mean, the first and most important step I always tell people, I'm not a professional, but I think talking to someone or anyone you know, a loved one, a friend, and saying, actually, I'm struggling, I'm going through this, I'm a bit scared. And getting the first conversation going, because that will inevitably help. It helped me. I told my parents, I said, I want to go to the doctor, there's something wrong with me. And that was my start to the road to recovery. So.
Any particular kind of words of advice when it's just so difficult to make that step of just vocalizing and being able to get it out there to even if it's someone dear to you?
I guess it's quite a difficult one, but it's patience, or because only you know when you're ready. You don't have to rush into telling someone. When you feel comfortable, when you feel a bit better on a day, it's the day to tell them, and understanding it's going to be okay. But it just takes time, because when I was ill, I just wanted to get better the day after, you know. But it took 3 years, but it did get better, so it just takes time.
And so talk me through the kind of the steps of recovery or getting better. And of course, it's never about kind of a discrete kind of cure or it's ever evolving, and we deal with issues all of the time. But can you take us through the trajectory of kind of improvement for you?
Yeah, so the first step was obviously the psychiatrist doing hypnotherapy, and he gave me charts to do, and I was talking about once a week at the time. So I went back every week, and I was still quite bad, not myself, my mum came with me, and I, you know, after about 6 months, I started getting a little bit better. The time of the appointments spaced out more, although I didn't know it, because when I was really ill, when I started feeling better, it actually made me anxious. So I, you know, because I'd been in a dark place for so long, as I started to see the light, I thought there's something wrong. So I started to get better from the hypnotherapy, and it's a strange thing to describe, because it's subconsciously you get better. I didn't really realise I was getting better, and then he said, I think you're done with me, George, and I'm going to refer you to a CBT therapist to tackle the OCD. So that was a week later. Then I went into the CBT therapist with my parents for the first session. He said, right, these are some tasks we're going to do, and he started tapping on my knees. I can't quite remember what that was about, but it was getting me to stop the thought process inside my head. You know, the stopping of just saying stop inside your head when you're about to go and wash your hands, actually then the brain thinks, oh, okay, I'm going to stop. So that was a good 6 months with that as well. Then I started getting better. And my psychiatrist said, I'm going to start weaning you off the medication. So I was on propranolol and progranulin, beta blocker, and an antipsychotic, I think, SSRI, which was obviously cutting the blood supply off, the beta blocker, the adrenaline supply off for the panic attacks. So that was a big step for me, and I was quite scared because I'd obviously relied on this medication. But I was still having the therapy at the time as sort of parallel with it while I was being weaned off it so I was learning to cope off the medication. And obviously that was the breathing exercises he was teaching me, the charts, writing down my thoughts and breaking down the thought process. So it's quite a long recovery period, but it went up and down, then it started going up and getting better. And as I started to realise that it was becoming a chore, I told him, I felt confident in telling him, I said, look, do you think I need this anymore? He said, well, it's up to you. Only you know when you're ready to go through this. So I said, can we make our appointment a little bit later? So I was challenging myself, testing myself, and I thought, I can do this. So I started telling myself more I could do it, felt confident about it. And then every time I saw him next after that for the last 6 months was just walking around the gardens and talking about how I was feeling. And that's when I had
Which is slightly unusual. It's walk and talk therapy is not the norm. Having therapy sessions outside of the office, but it worked for you. And
yeah, it really did. And I was just I was just walking around and talking about how I was feeling, and he said, you're doing really well. So and that was my story.
And speaking of walking and talking, is exercise, does that exercise feature as part of your general well-being? I'm
probably a bit guilty of not doing that much exercise. I mean, I work part-time as well, so I do definitely do over 10,000 steps a day, not outside particularly, but I'm just, I do a lot of reading that helps me calm down, listen to music, but exercise is finding the time to do it. I know we all have to find the time to do some exercise, but I try and do it by reading and listening to music and taking some downtime every now and again.
And Maison de Choup, is that part of your also well-being strategy? Does it give you purpose? Do you enjoy working on it? Does it give you fulfillment?
Definitely. At the time, it was a project and it was keeping my mind off everything else inside my head. So when I started, I thought, this is great fun. I wasn't at college, so this little project got bigger and bigger and bigger and grew. And then I thought, maybe I could try and make a career out of this. Maybe I could take this forward and help other people at the same time, and also give back to Young Minds charity to help the young people who aren't fortunate enough to go privately. And now it has become that project. It's become sort of my full-time venture. Obviously still work part-time, but it occupies my mind, and I'm meeting some amazing people, and it's quite cathartic sharing my story for a living, because it sort of reinforces the fact that I did suffer, I still do suffer, and by using my voice to share it to other young people, it's encouraging them that it's going to be okay, and that there's nothing to be ashamed of when suffering.
And I noticed that you are very vocal on social media, and you've got to check out George's Instagram account. It is just so, it's everything from entertaining to educating, and it's uplifting and authentic. Presumably cathartic for you as well? Yeah,
I mean, the thing for me for social media is obviously there's a massive stigma around it at the moment, and mental health problems, and it's Instagram is all about show the best, forget the rest. For me, it's just about being myself. I can't be anyone else. I'm just my honest self. So I just share what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. I share my love for my sister, and we're just messing about and arguing and stuff, and in a sort of playful way, because it's what I do. And then I share the messages of when I'm having a bad day and what I'm going through and when I'm feeling it. So I shared a post of me crying the other day, just to, men cry too, because there's this stigma around men not crying, and they have to be strong leaders. And I do that, and it's organic, and it's honest, and as you say, authentic, which also, in a different medium, encourages other people to do the same. I get quite a lot of messages of people saying, you've helped me recognise I'm suffering as well.
I was going to ask, what is the reception, both good and bad, to you being so frank on social media? Yeah,
so I do get I get a lot of positive people saying, and obviously after the speeches, a lot of people saying that they didn't feel comfortable talking to me afterwards. They messaged me saying, your speech has inspired me, and your videos inspire me, your posts are inspiring, or really helped me to recognise that I'm not myself. And I always offer my support to them. I'm always there for them. I say, look, I'm always here if you need a chat, because I know being able to talk to someone is the most important thing. Sometimes there's negative bits, with becoming a mental health ambassador or role model. There's if you do say something a bit off the beaten track, people then say you're meant to be a mental health ambassador, which is quite difficult, because then I am becoming that person that can't do anything but be positive and uplifting and inspiring. So there's that side of it as well. But I continue to be myself and sort of listen to people's feedback. And if I, in my deep down, think I don't think that's that offending anyone, then I just carry on. Yeah,
I find a lot of the posts and the stories very humorous, and I think for many people humor is one of their well-being tools as well. So I do think that you not only do so well to bring attention to these issues, but also to see the lighter side of some of the human condition as well. What are some of the challenges that you go through with having a fashion label and working and being young? So
living up to expectations is one. As soon as you say, I'm quite modest as a person, so as soon as I say I've got a fashion brand, people expect me to be on the catwalk and going to fashion shows and stuff, and I generally that's not what I want for the brand. And I've been to Fashion Week a couple of times, and I'm not a personal fan. It's quite a difficult environment to be around with mental health problems, because everyone is there and they're not themselves. They all sort of rub shoulders and stuff, and that's not really what I like, and it makes me anxious because I don't know if people are being real with me. So I have been a couple of times just to share the message about the brand and about mental health, wearing a high vis that says mental health matters, just not taking it too seriously. But in terms of that, but it also brings great positives. Like, I've met some amazing people, and I can help other people using that. So I now help students with the brand. But working, it's quite daunting sometimes, I guess. It's about what if it all fails, which it won't, but the thoughts inside your head. So it's about sort of understanding those and just powering on through, I guess, sometimes.
And social support currently?
Good, pretty good. I've got a good support network around me, quite a good team. My family help out with certain stuff. So that's and the brand obviously is getting a massive response, really positive, and it's got some great supporters as well. So.
And so, where do you learn to grow a business? Are you getting any help with that? Are you learning as you go? It's very inspiring to watch on the outside.
Yeah, where do you learn to grow a business? I guess you don't. I suppose it's just like a learn, make mistakes as you go along. There's no manual to running a business, as much as you can go to business school and learn how to. It's not necessarily going to prepare you for the uncertainty of everything that goes on with the business. Things go wrong all the time. You just have to problem solve and get through them. But sort of having the thought in your head that actually this is going to be fine. I'll get through this. I've been through worse. I can do this. And I think that sort of tenacity comes from suffering from such a dark illness. And with the business, it's about just meeting people and carrying on and learning as you go along and making mistakes, understanding that it's okay to make those mistakes and almost failing forward. Every failure takes you learn from each failure and you don't do it again. So,
And what are your future plans for the business?
Well, the future plans at the moment are obviously continuing to grow, collaborating with more people that suffer themselves. But for me personally, my goal at the moment is to get pop-up shops around the country, sort of Bristol, Brighton, Manchester, all the hotspot areas, and make the pop-up shop and obviously have the clothing inside, but also make it a safe space for people that if they are having a mentally bad day, they can come in and sit down and there'll be sofas and be calming music and they can just talk to people. And these will be in the areas, and then around those areas I'll do the speeches in the local schools, colleges, universities to encourage people that it's okay, and then obviously drive them to the pop-up shop as well. So that's my future plan on the cards, and sort of obviously working with more amazing people and carrying on designing stuff.
That's excellent.
Thank you.
Now, where can people, firstly, purchase some of this merchandise, and secondly, find you and see what you're up to?
So you can buy the brand from Maison de Choup online, so that's maisondechoup.co.uk, and you can find me on Instagram, so all the social media channels for the brand are Maison de Choup, and my personal one is George David Hodgson on Instagram, and I'm George Hodgson on Twitter. Not that I use Twitter much because I'm very creative and visual, so Instagram's my forte.
You're also on LinkedIn as well.
Yes.
You have a huge following. How did you build that up?
I forgot about LinkedIn. Yeah, so I'm just George David Hodgson on LinkedIn, and I use LinkedIn as one of my primary drivers of traffic and interest in myself. I put a post on there a couple of months ago now about working at Sainsbury's, just being honest and saying that it's okay to work part-time while you're running a business. No one is an overnight success. I was in my Sainsbury's uniform, and it got an overwhelming response, sort of 7,900 likes and seen by 600,000 people. And I had no idea. So yeah, I use LinkedIn, and now it's obviously sort of skyrocketed my profile generally, and I share positive messages on there.
Yeah, well, I must say, I mean, the brand that you've built, not only your fashion label, but also your personal brand and presence on social media, it's inspiring. It's impressive numbers-wise, but more important, what it stands for, and the message that you're sending out to others, that it's okay to talk and to look after yourself as well. So really great work. Thank you so much for joining us today,
George.
Sheri.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you feel you'd benefit from therapy and want to transform your life, HarleyTherapy.com is here to help you book counselling with qualified professional therapists online or in person at times and prices that suit you wherever you are in the world. If this is your first listen to Therapy Lab, do hit subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and listen at HarleyTherapy.com/therapylab. We'll see you next time.